Well, that was no fun for me or for any of my green and white friends, but I think it's what most of us expected. I expected a little bit of a closer game. As far as score predicting, though, shout out to Dan Leach on 97.1, who thought the score of the game would be 40-10 Michigan win, and he was obviously pretty damn close. But I mean, we can obviously get into the game. Michigan fans have every right to gloat, which I'm sure they're going to do. And then as far as Michigan State goes, I think for a lot of the fan base, it's almost a shocking lack of pride that this team and this coaching staff have for really for the season, but for here now. One thing that you knew going into the game was that Michigan was a better football team. But, one thing, again, that just is shocking was, Michigan State, they came out to play, much like the Ohio State game, they came out to play strong to start off, right? What's my stance on Michigan State? I mean, they need a complete rebuild. I think Dantonio is going to retire. So instead of firing him, he needs to get out there one way or another. But if Dantonio doesn't retire, then he does need to be fired. But in my opinion, he's already, told the upper brass there, hey, I'm gone at the end of the season anyway. So in that instance, it probably doesn't make sense to fire him and just add, salt to the wound. But that's what's got to happen. If he doesn't retire and he wants to run it back, Mark Moe beat down. Yeah, that was a beat down of epic proportions. I was alive for the 49-3 Bobby Williams game, but as far as the Michigan win, this is easily the most defeated that I've seen Michigan State in my life, which is the biggest kind of admonishment on the coaching staff for this game and even for the season. They just quit. It's kind of shocking because Michigan, they weren't really able to get the running game going, but they didn't have to. Shea Patterson, he played a terrific game, probably his best game in a Michigan uniform. And every time Michigan ran a RPO or they ran a swing pass, a wide receiver screen, it looked like for the defensive stance of Michigan State, it looked like the first time they had ever seen a play like that, and they were solely unprepared for what was going to happen. Brian Little says, I'm sick. Dantonio is the best thing that ever happened to little brother. Yeah, Dantonio, well, I mean, you misspelled his name, so more disrespect there. But Dantonio is definitely the best coach in school history. But that doesn't mean that he hasn't gotten worse, right? You have to evolve with the times. And no matter how good of a coach you are, if you're not progressing, then why are we going to let you come back for the future? I think it's enough of a respect to not fire him if he's going to end up retiring. But he's shown even the last couple of years that he doesn't want to change. Instead of firing anybody on the offensive staff, he just literally gave everybody else different titles. So no, Dantonio needs to go one way or the other. Hopefully we can let him go out on his own volition because, like you said, he is the best thing that's happened to this football program. But, he's also the worst thing that's happened to this football program in the last, 4 or 5 years. First time in 12 years, Blue was finally able to win a game against my Spartans in convincing fashion. That's not really true. Michigan, they beat them pretty bad last year, even if the score didn't necessarily reflect that. But, last year they won by 14, but it was it didn't feel like a 14-point game just watching that. Go Blue beat down. Am I okay, little brother? I'm not sure I know you, sir, but I'm fine. It's a frustrating. The loss itself isn't frustrating because it was expected. I didn't expect this bad of a beatdown, but that's what happens when your team and your coaching staff quit. And I'm of course on Twitter. We do our Sports Carnage podcast, so we have the link in the description there. But just on the Twitter page for the podcast, scrolling through, we obviously follow a lot of former Michigan and Michigan State athletes, and from really kind of across the board from Michigan State football players. That's the one thing that if it caught our eyes just as viewers, you knew it caught their eyes as former players. Where they said, hey, where's the pride? There's no reason that you should let a team disrespect you like this. Even if you lose, you should still scrap with them. You should be tough. And Michigan State didn't show any of that. When they get down by 17, 24, 27, it was 10-37, that's when you could really start to see them just quit and give up and not make their reads. Michigan's last touchdown, the defensive back just came all the way up and then I don't even know who it was. I'm sure I could check I had the box score. I just don't know where it went. But they let the Michigan receiver, just go and run right by him for the touchdown. And that was the other thing that killed Michigan State early. Nothing killed them late because they just weren't in the game. So everything Michigan was doing was working, again, because they decided they wanted to stop playing. But early in the game, and even when they had an outside shot of it, when they're still only down like 14, and you think, okay, maybe if they can get a turnover and get some positive, in like a positive field situation, and then they're able to score a touchdown, then maybe things get a little bit interesting again. But, those third and longs. So the first drive they had the 3rd and 14, and Michigan was probably inside like the 10-yard line. Shea Patterson completes a 16-yard pass, and then 3rd and 7 on Michigan's 98-yard touchdown drive. The first set of downs for they're at like the 5-yard line. It's 3rd and 7. You have a chance to really flip field position, and then our cornerbacks are playing way off Donovan Peoples-Jones, and he's able to get like a 10-yard gain on just a simple comeback route that was never going to be covered because of how soft they were playing them. And then obviously the 3rd and 20 where Shea hit, he hit some receiver right down the middle for a big first down, and there was nobody within, it seemed like 15 yards of them either direction. Jason says Lewerke is terrible. Yeah, Lewerke has regressed every year since 2 years ago when they won 10 games, and when you could see he still made mistakes, but it looked like he had a lot of flash of just better promise ahead of him. Lewerke's awful. I don't know why he was out there when they were losing by 27, when they were losing by 30. Really, the only reason I can think of is if Dantonio is going to retire and just kind of go out, he's going to go out with his guys. I don't think anybody else, I pray nobody else is going to be from this coaching staff is going to be here next year. So it's not like they need to get a look at, I think Peyton Thorne is one of the backup quarterbacks, and then a guy like Theo Day, who you hope he's able to beat out Rocky Lombardi. I think he's probably the best quarterback on the roster. Joe says, will we recover? I'll be fine personally for the rest of this year after, maybe Michigan State wins the next 2 games and then they get the Quick Lane Bowl and then we can all go see them at Ford Field. I actually consider myself really lucky as a Lions fan that I'm able to watch the Lions on both Saturday and Sunday. It's really a treat if you haven't done it before and you thought, you could only take one day of Lions football. If you do love the green and white this year, thankfully that you've gotten two days of that and you guys get a whole weekend of incompetence. Avery says the quarterback couldn't hit the broadside of a barn. Yeah, again, Lewerke was terrible. I don't know if it was the worst game I've seen him play because last year against Michigan he was really bad too. But even the passes he completes, and this has been a theme all year, he doesn't hit anybody ever in stride. It's always the receivers trying to make a play. And then when that happens, you take away any of the yards after the catch they can get because most of the time what happens is they're trying to recover. They're trying to, contort their body to catch a ball that's behind them, and then that either slows down their momentum and they get hit right away, or they have to dive like you saw on the I think Julian Barnett made a catch on like 3rd or it was 2nd down. No, it was 3rd down, and it would have been an easy first down. There was nobody within like 5 yards of Barnett, and he caught the ball basically at the sticks. But because Lewerke, threw a bad pass, he had to extend for it, and then when he came down, it was like 4th and 1. Michigan State ended up getting that first down anyway, so at the end of the day, that specific play didn't really matter, but it's just kind of a microcosm of what you've seen all year is even when Lewerke's completing passes, he's way off on just so many of the passes that he's throwing. David says, go blue. If I truly believe Dantonio is a great coach, needs to recruit better players. I actually like this game plan, but it lacked execution. I hated the game plan because it was super predictable and there was no changing it up. Especially the defense. We talked about some of the 3rd and longs, Michigan State not bringing pressure and then allowing Shea Patterson to sit back in the pocket and just make plays to the better receivers that Michigan has. Michigan has way better athletes at receiver than Michigan State does at cornerback, in the defensive secondary, safety included, of course. And you knew that going in. Even if you're the most diehard Michigan State fan, there's nothing there. There's no logical way that you would have deduced, guys like Josiah Scott, Josh Butler were better athletes than Donovan Peoples-Jones, Nico Collins, Tariq Black, even Ronnie Bell, who had a huge game today. He had 9 catches for like 150 yards or something. Yep, 9 catches, 150. Amazingly, he was not one of the receivers that caught one of Shea's 4 touchdown passes. That was Eubanks. Who else? Eubanks, Cornelius Johnson. I think it was the receiver who had the last one on the RPO where Michigan State's cornerback bit, and then he just didn't feel like recovering at all. Nico had a touchdown catch, and then Donovan Peoples-Jones had a touchdown catch. And, again, obviously credit to Shea Patterson. I know a lot of Michigan fans don't like him for for logical reasons and for reasons that make sense when you see him all year. But, Michigan State at least made Shea Patterson look like a Heisman Trophy winning quarterback. 384 yards, 4 touchdowns, 24 of 33 passing. So there's nothing more that you really could have asked of him. So it's just kind of a perfect storm of everything that went right for Michigan and then everything that was going to go wrong for Michigan State. Jason says, need to get Pat Fitzgerald. I wouldn't hate that. I don't know how much of a recruiter Pat Fitzgerald is, except I did see on Twitter, and again, so it's not like I saw it directly from a recruiting site, but I'm going to imagine the person that tweeted it out wasn't just making up their own rankings, and Northwestern was ahead of Michigan State in the recruiting rankings. I think they were 32nd, and Michigan State was like 43rd, something like that. But, I mean, Pat Fitzgerald is having a real tough time this year as well. I think Northwestern is the 129th out of 130 Division I teams as far as defense goes. And then they won today, but that's because they were playing, maybe the worst team in all of Division I football in UMass. But I think Northwestern only has like 2 wins on the year. So, I do think Pat Fitzgerald is a good coach, though. And this year, much like, just this year for Dantonio, just this year for Pat Fitzgerald, you're not going to look at that and say in totality that person is a bad coach or that they can't coach. And I think Dantonio was a great coach, but the game just passed him by. He's not a great coach anymore. His body of work, of course, overall is amazing and great for Michigan State, but he's not somebody that you're going to be able to move forward with. So you have to hope that, he ends up retiring, because you always want a guy that's done so much for your program and just for the team you root for. You'd rather see them go out in at least a meaningful or a minutely graceful way, to where they can retire and then they can get some of their roses while they still deserve them. And you don't ever want to see them just canned and kicked to the side and have a little bit of that animosity at the end of their tenure. Jeff, what do you think the Lions are going to do tomorrow? I think the Lions are going to lose tomorrow, and I hope they lose, but Stafford's not playing. And the only reason I hope they lose is because, kind of unlike losing football games in college football, if you lose football games in the NFL, you get a better player at the end of the year, or maybe at the beginning of next year, depending on how you want to look at it during the NFL draft. And that's what I hope the Lions are able to do. I don't want them to play Stafford the rest of the year. It doesn't make any sense. And I think if they lose the rest of their games or only win 4 or 5 games, that Bob Quinn and Matt Patricia are gone. And that is what I want to see. So Bob Quinn, if at the end of this year, I'll be very happy. During the year, it's obviously a lot of heartache watching Michigan State football, watching the Lions. But if at the end of the year, Mark Dantonio is gone and Bob Quinn's gone and Matt Patricia's gone, and then Bill Beekman, the athletic director at Michigan State, are gone, then that will be that'll be a little bit sweet and give you something to look forward to moving forward. David said Michigan is evolving with the new style of college football. Starty is still playing old school smash mouth. They're trying, they just don't have they're just not able to run the ball. And that's why I said they were a lot like the Lions earlier in our video here, because you see that with the Lions as well, is they can't run the ball, but they continue to try. They continue to hand the ball off, and they don't get anything forward from it. Michigan State averaged under 2 yards a carry today. I know some of those are in college football. The sack numbers can kind of skew it a little bit, but still 30. I mean, their main running back, Elijah Collins, had 12 carries for 27 yards, 2.3 yards a carry. Brian Lewerke, again, the sacks are a little bit mess. They just kind of funk with the numbers a little bit. But I mean, Lewerke carried the ball well, and he had success carrying the ball on the 2 4th downs that went for first downs. But other than that, a lot of his runs, they weren't moving the chains, and they weren't even really getting a lot of positive yardage that you like to see in like the 5 to 6 yard pops that you can get on first down and then turn second and third down into way more manageable situations than if you take an incompletion or just like a loss on first or second down, and now you're in, third and long. But Michigan State, they do continue to run the ball, and I really wish they wouldn't. But when they throw the ball, at least with Brian Lewerke, the ball is not getting there. So you have to move the ball some way, and you are really hoping that people are able to get there, or people are able to create holes, and that's not what happens, because Michigan State's not a good team. And even regardless of the injuries, if they had their entire offensive line intact, that's still not a very good offensive line anyway. So the fact that the bad starters are hurt, you're bringing in bench guys who are most of the time just going to be worse. So it's kind of a no-win situation for Michigan State in terms of their offensive line. I mean, again, all the credit to Michigan today. I think in recent years, even before, or definitely before, like Harbaugh got to Michigan, one of the things that you always saw in the Michigan State game was Michigan State took the game way more seriously than the Michigan players did. Michigan State came out with the intensity. They came out with the mentality that they wanted to just crush the other school, and they were going to keep it full throttle all game. And then in this situation, that was reversed. Michigan State was the team that ended up cowering, and Michigan never let their foot off the gas. Their last touchdown was a passing touchdown. I think maybe not all of their touchdowns were passing touchdowns, but they have the block punt. They're the ones bringing the intensity. I know there's a lot of like stupid taunting penalties, and a lot of personal foul penalties that most of them for both ways were pretty weak. I hated the officiating early in the game, from both sides of it. I thought they should have let them play a little bit more, and the broadcast crew mentioned it. And it is a Fox broadcasting crew, and Fox is obviously the station that held the Thursday night football game where Myles Garrett went crazy and started swinging Mason Rudolph's helmet at his head. So maybe that did have something to do with it, with the way they were kind of officiating the chippiness. But I think they let a little bit more go later in the game than they did, certainly just kind of in the beginning stages and then in the middle stages of the games. Let's see here. Okay, so Michigan did have a rushing touchdown. That was right. Hassan got there from the Wildcat formation. That's another positive or silver lining for Michigan State. The only other team to ever get beat by the Wildcat is the New England Patriots. So we have that in common with the greatest franchise in NFL history. Tony says, yes, position for the draft. The Lions and the Pistons always win meaningless games at the end of the year, messing up good draft positions. The Lions certainly. The Pistons, well, the Pistons don't do a lot of winning, and then when they do win at the end of the year, at least that gives them a playoff spot instead of just gives them kind of like worse odds at the lottery. But that's really what we have for today, unless you guys have any more questions. Tony says Dantonio has a lack of talent. One of the announcers talked about the rise of Penn State hurting MSU recruiting. What do you think? I think the rise of you can say it the rise, so it sounds funny, but I think what's going to hurt MSU's recruiting more is teams like Cincinnati, who Michigan State was pulling those guys, because Penn State they were usually beating Michigan State in recruiting anyway. They do have a better brand. They do have more talent to pull from in Pennsylvania than Michigan State does in their own backyard in Michigan. But a lot of those guys that were getting passed over by Michigan and Ohio State were going to Michigan State, and they were competing with teams Toledo, Cincinnati, and those are kind of the guys that MSU was able to pull. And now, with Luke Fickell over at Luke Fickell at Cincinnati, and even PJ Fleck at Minnesota. Those guys they're better personalities than Dantonio, and they're better recruiters than Dantonio is too. So some of those kids that may have gone to Michigan State are going to those schools now. Where Michigan State did get really hurt by Penn State in recruiting was with is it KJ Hamler Hamler, but the wide receiver from Penn State that torched both Michigan and Michigan State, and he's from Pontiac. And I guess he was supposed to go to MSU, and then either flipped his commitment or MSU was thought to be leading the whole way, and then he went to Penn State. Regardless, he's not here, which sucks because it'd be great to have a guy like that, considering MSU doesn't have really any team speed. The team speed that they had was Jalen Naylor, who ended up getting hurt. Earlier in the year, he dressed today. I don't think he played. And then Julian Barnett, who's still a true freshman. Well, other than that, let's see if Michigan State they had to have more total yards than they had last year. So that's a positive sign for some regression. They cracked over 100 yards this year. So a lot of little wins there for Michigan State. Let's see, Michigan 25 first downs. Yeah, Michigan State almost more than doubled their yards last year. They had 220. So not as embarrassing of a yardage output as last year, but probably a much more embarrassing game just overall, especially considering, they didn't score. They scored 3 points in the last 3 quarters, right? They came out, they had the 7-0 lead in the first quarter, and the team's pretty hype, and there are some things where you thought, Michigan State might be able to keep it close. Michigan kind of pours an avalanche on in the second quarter, but really at the end of the first, is when they started their first touchdown drive, and then they punched it in, like the first or second play of the second quarter, something like that. Michigan goes on to score 2 more times, and then they have double-digit points in all of the second, third, and fourth quarter, and Michigan State is just not able to match that. If you told anybody that Michigan was going to score 44 points in this game, there's no way that Michigan State was going to be able to match their offensive output, and that's what we ended up seeing today. But very, very disappointing for myself, although I know the majority of you guys are probably happy, and you deserve to gloat, you deserve to talk trash. They obviously deserve the win today. For another 365 days, they do get to be the kings of college football in the state of Michigan. So a literal hats off to the Michigan fans, alumni, players, coaches, whoever. But that is what we have for you guys today. I'll see you probably tomorrow after the Lions game. Hopefully there's a little bit of a better mood in myself personally, but tomorrow we'll all be on the same team as opposed to being a state and a Facebook group divided. But if you guys haven't checked it out yet, before I sign off, make sure you do check out our Sports Carnage podcast. We have the link up there in the status for you. It's highlighted blue, so you can't miss it. You can Google us. You can find us on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Podbean, Apple Podcast. Really, however you like to listen to your podcast, we'll be there for you on every platform except Spotify. So don't listen to us there. But you can't. If you could, that'd be fantastic. But find us everywhere else. We do these Facebook reactions. We'll be here after, like I said, after the Lions game tomorrow. And then any questions that you guys have, you can ask us through our Facebook inbox, through our Twitter. But yeah, so slide in those DMs and see if you guys have any questions about us personally. Rate, comment, subscribe, review, share our videos, everything that you guys do and is able to help. We really appreciate. But that's what we have. Stay safe for the rest of your Saturday. I hope you enjoy the rest of your weekend and go all your favorite sports teams. And